name is Sean. I'm the managing director at HUGE Improv Theater, and welcome to the second session of the HUGE Artists Summit, which is Improv Across Borders. The Artists Summit is an event that we at HUGE Theater do each year as a part of our mission to support the improv community, especially in the Twin Cities, but this year, heck, everywhere. In sharing some information that is valuable to improvisers, but isn't actually about improv technique or doing the improv itself. So in past years, we've done things, everything from graphic design for improvisers to how to direct. And this year, we're really focused in on how we can connect across borders and identities. And this session is very much in line with that. On that note, I would love to introduce Carla Dingle of Queen City Comedy, who has graciously agreed to join us to talk about her work and their work on the Global Improv Project, and to talk a little bit about intercommunity collaborations in improv, how we do them, why we do them, and what value they bring. So welcome, Carla. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
So to start out, I would just love to learn a little bit more about you. What is your role at Queen City Comedy? What's your background?
My unofficial title has somehow become mom at Queen City Comedy, but I guess my official title is education and marketing coordinator. So I do the marketing, all of our social media, as well as procure folks to come in and teach workshops and classes for Queen City Comedy. And when we were doing our level classes, which we aren't really doing that much of anymore, we're helping with the curriculum and things of that nature. So,
nice.
Yeah.
So a pretty broad palette of things there.
Yeah, we're a small organization. There's me and one other person. So that really run the day to day. His name is Cale Evans, and he's phenomenal. And he handles like the business side, and he's our tech guy and all that kind of stuff. So
nice.
we're a good counterbalance.
That's wonderful. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the history of Queen City Comedy itself. What's the story there?
Sure. So here in Charlotte, North Carolina, when I started doing improv, there was primarily one improv theater. It's called Charlotte Comedy Theater. It's run by Kelly Simmelsberger. Okay. And they're going to be celebrating their 20th anniversary this year. Okay. And Kelly trained in Chicago and then sort of relocated back down here and started a theater. And it was sort of like the only space in town for many, many years. And then folks began to sort of create offshoot teams and some additional theaters. And so one of the reasons Queen City Comedy came together was through a conversation with Cale Evans and a woman named Elizabeth Byland, who's still very much involved but doesn't live in Charlotte anymore. And they just wanted to bring the community together, not just the improv community, the comedy community, because everyone was sort of over in their own little corners and not working together. And we thought, improv's about collaboration. So we decided, like in December, that in January we would throw a festival. I don't know
Perfect.
what we were thinking, right? We have no experience throwing a festival. So I think there were 5 or 6 of us on board doing it. And that was sort of the creation of Queen City Comedy. So we came up with a mission statement. We held our first festival. I actually work at the acting studio. So it's an acting studio that has 3 small stages. And we had shows running simultaneously, stand-up, improv, sketch. And it sort of started from there. And then our big Broadway theater house, they came to the festival, which was just crazy. And then we began partnering with them. And so Queen City Comedy sort of grew from there. We host 2 annual festivals, one that's an all-female festival, and one that's our Queen City Comedy Experience. And then we do monthly shows where we can feature some of these acts in a much larger forum than most improvisers get to play in. 200 plus audience members often.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And our last festival we didn't get to do, but the one before that, we bring in some really big names. So like Fortune Feimster filmed her Netflix special at our festival.
Oh, that's great.
And stuff like that. So for us, it's just about community, bringing people together, showcasing the talent that's in Charlotte, because we're not known necessarily for comedy. We're not known for improv, but there's quite a bit of talent here. And really what's come out of it is just huge community. Like I didn't know much about stand-up. I mean, other than watching it. And now I have a greater appreciation for that, as well as sketch and stuff. So
That's wonderful. What sort of cross-pollination has there been between those different communities?
It's really been it's really sort of created a very family like environment, just so
Hmm,
much support. But also we've seen like stand-ups taking improv classes
that's
and
great.
improvisers taking some sketch classes. We had Kevin
Yeah,
McDonald from Kids in the Hall come down, and
sure.
I think he's been like 3 times now, teaching some classes like how to improvise and then turn that into a sketch. And so it's just been like I took a stand-up class. I was like, I don't need to be here, but it was fun and interesting. So I think it's just been that, and then just like letting the stand-up people know like how improv can be beneficial to them, right? You can write
Hmm.
your set completely and it completely bomb, and if you have the skill to improvise some stuff, you probably have some stuff that you were moving around in your head. So I think it's just creating some value. I think has been really great. Like people
Yeah,
recognizing that these are skills.
sure. Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I know in many communities, it feels like there's a real um, oppositional relationship sometimes between stand-up and improv, and certainly some wonderful crossover too. I know we have some artists here in Minneapolis who do both and are the better for it. But that's so exciting to hear that that barrier sort of been broken down for you there through that
Yeah, and
collaboration.
even creating shows that are featuring like improvisers and sketch together, or improv
Yeah,
and stand up together.
sure.
And producers are like, instead of just a straight stand up show, like, oh, well, let's bring these folks in, and so it's been really great as well. And stand up people get paid, so when you do a
Perfect.
stand up show as an
Yeah.
improviser, you get some money or some chicken wings, whatever it may be. But improvisers, we don't make any money.
No,
So.
but that's wonderful. But yeah, they're artists and they should be getting paid, and it's wonderful that it's helping them find those opportunities
Yeah.
to get out there and get paid for their work. That's great. I mentioned before we started, you were previously from Minneapolis, but
Yeah,
didn't necessarily do any improv there. Do you
I
mind
did
sharing that
not.
story with everybody? Because I just think it's lovely how you came
Sure.
to be
So
involved in
when
improv.
I was in Minneapolis, I don't think I told you this, Sean.
Hmm.
I was the general manager of the Build-A-Bear workshop in
Oh
Mall
my
of
gosh.
America. That's what I did for many, many years. And then my husband got relocated and we moved down here. And then about that time, my son was just getting to the age where like I didn't feel like he needed me every single moment of every single day, which
Hmm.
that was like 9, which I don't know what that says about me. Uh, and we were on a vacation before, right after we moved here, and it was on a cruise ship. And Second City was performing, and I'd been doing theater my whole life. And then, as a mom and working in retail, like scripted work wasn't an option. I couldn't make rehearsals
Hmm.
or take 3 weekends off in a row to perform. And so I was really missing that and trying to figure out in a new city who I was and where I belonged and where I fit in. And we were on this cruise ship, and there was Second City performing their tour company. And I've met a couple of people now that I'm convinced were actually in that show, but
Oh wow.
I cannot verify it. And so I watched every show. My husband was like, "Oh my god, I cannot watch another improv show." Little did he know.
Oh man.
And I was turning 40 that year, so it was like big turnaround for me.
Sure.
So I said when I got back to Charlotte, if there was improv, I would take an improv class. And I signed up, and there was one like starting the next week, and I was like, heart palpitations. I don't know if I can do this. But I signed up and I went to the first class, and halfway through, I chickened out and went to the bathroom and hid for like 15 minutes, thinking everybody would be back in class. And when I came out, this lovely gentleman was like, "Oh, we were looking for you." And
Oh,
so I went back into the class, and I've been doing improv ever since. So
oh, that's great. That is such an interestingly common experience. People just like, I need to stay in the car a few more minutes. I really need to step away to the bathroom. And what a difference it makes when someone says like, "Hey, we're glad you're here. Please come back."
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I mean, improv is like jumping off a cliff without a parachute. I don't know if people, obviously improvisers, know that, but it's
sure.
like, yeah, like that's a whole lot to take on. And anytime someone shows up, first time to an improv class, like I'm always like, pat yourself on the back. That was huge. That
Hmm.
was a huge step. So
Yeah. Yeah. Without dragging us too far off topic here. Yeah, I had always been one of those sort of, please respect our time. Please be on time for class sticklers. And yeah, Jill Bernard, the education director at Huge, shared with me the story of, yeah, someone who was late consistently every week, but she found out that they were sitting in their car in the lot for those 15 minutes every week. And it took them that much time to get through the door. So that gave me a new appreciation for that and made me not want to shame people. But anyway, back to the topic at hand. Could you tell us all a little bit about the Global Improv Project? In fact, tell us a lot about it.
Sure. So it started by accident, I guess. So just like everyone else last year, we thought this isn't going to last very long.
Mhm.
And so we hosted like a couple online workshops just for people we knew here in the Charlotte community. And then I was like, let's just do some drop-in classes. So Kale and I scheduled 2 last June. And he taught the first one and I taught the second one. And in the very first class, there was one person locally and all these people from around the world. And we were like, how do they even know who we are? Or like that we exist? What is happening?
That's
and I was
great.
like, there has to be a fluke, Kale. And he's like, yeah, maybe it is. Maybe it is. And we still have 4 people from that first class that are still taking stuff with us. This is really exciting. And it was just a drop in. And so I taught a class like 2 weeks later. And in my class, again, it was all folks from all over the world.
Wow.
India, Mexico, Israel, France, Germany. And I was like, what is happening? I don't understand what is happening. And so we sort of sat down and we talked about it and we're like, well, if all these people are out there wanting to do improv, what if we host an audition and like create an improv team? Because what we were hearing consistently in these drop-in classes were we don't have improv where we are. We don't have a community that we can dig into, or we have a community that's chosen to step back and not do anything online, which obviously no one thought it would go on this long. So.
Right.
And so we were like, well, we're not doing anything else. Let's coach a team online. And so we posted some auditions early June. And we had over 100 people audition. And we were like, what is it? Like, where are these people coming from? How do they even know we're here? So our goal was enough people for one team. And we ended up with 3 teams out of that July class. And they are all still active. I would say 80% of the people that auditioned and were put on a team, it was like 32 people, are still with us today, which is really fantastic. And we just immediately started doing rehearsals for international people. Holy moly.
Sure.
Kale loves a doodle poll. Doodle polls scare me to death. And it's like, and so he was coaching one of the teams. I was coaching the other, and a woman named Mandy Butler, who is a theater teacher out of South Carolina, was coaching the third. So we all approached it very differently to figure out how do we get these people together at the right time, and we've done pretty good. We're reanalyzing a little of it now that the world's opening back up in some places. But we just started rehearsals, and by October, everyone had done their first show, and we've just sort of been moving from there. Part of the project, though, was not just our big thing for us was not to ask players to pay to be a part of our program, because that's not always feasible everywhere in the world. So that was our first one. And then we also wanted to be able to provide a space where you didn't have to pay. So through that, we started doing more classes and workshops and using the money from those to fund and support our coaches. So the folks who have been with us do not pay any money to be a part of this program, which I think would have been exclusionary for quite a few people if we had said this is what we needed financially to run it. So and then in February, we hosted auditions again for a woman non-binary team, and we had like 55 fantastic improvisers show up. And again, we thought we'd get one team, and now we have 2 teams, and they'll be making their debut in May, doing their very first shows. So just female improvisers from around the world.
Great. And people who want to see those shows, is the best spot to look, say, on Queen City Comedy's Facebook page? Is that the best spot
that's typically the best place to do that, is to see our shows. That's pretty much where they are consistently. Beyond just the individual team shows, we started doing what we call our Mix It Up show, which is people could sign up who were on any of the teams to just do a show and play together, so that they were getting access to more players from around the world. And then we started doing a duo show, where 6 people would sign up and they didn't know who their partner was until we chose
Sure.
it. And then they did a duo show. So just again, providing as many opportunities. And then we do one more show called the Community Playhouse, which is open to our students or our people in our community who aren't on teams. So that way they get an opportunity to play and perform, but maybe can't commit to a consistent rehearsal time or miss the auditions or something like that. So.
Sure. Now, when you say our community, I know that can take on a lot of meanings right now. Do you mean local to Charlotte, or do you mean your community of performers that have sort of gathered around this project?
Yeah, so my community has grown to the world.
Yeah.
So when I think of our community, I really think of it as a global community. We have a Facebook group with about 200 members that have been participating consistently throughout the year, and I would say 10% of them are from the Carolinas, as we like to call it. Sure. Because we're right on the border of South Carolina, so like in 15, it's the same way. It's like going to Wisconsin, right? So yeah, and most of them that are participating with us are in different areas of the United States or throughout Europe, and then we have a strong presence from India and the Philippines that we work with as well.
That's great. Let me ask you, I don't want you to give up any trade secrets here, but can I ask how you went about getting the word out about this project at the beginning? Where was that posted?
We did like an event on Facebook, and we did an event on Eventbrite.
Oh my gosh.
And then I'm sure there was some word of mouth as well. And I think it was a time before the whole world was like doing online improv. So when we first started doing some drop-in classes, I think, you could find a drop-in class at like the Magnet Theater and some of these bigger names, but maybe not everyone. So I think people Googled, I don't know, and they kind of showed up. I know for our second set of auditions, when we did for our women non-binary team, I think at that point we had begun to sort of establish ourselves as a name that people at least knew of. And so I think for that, it was a little bit easier to get people to show up. But I don't know, I guess I should ask people, how did you hear about us and where did you come from? Most of the folks from our drop-in classes auditioned for the team. So we had, some folks from there, and then just people looking for something to do.
Of course. Wonderful. And what did those auditions look like? I mean, with improvisers from all over the world, how did those function, and were there any challenges there?
The biggest challenge is always time zone, right? So we didn't want to host like 7 different auditions because we valued our time. So it was like finding some times, and then the quantity of people was nothing we expected. So thank gosh that there's breakout rooms in Zoom, and we had 5 of our faculty members there for our first set of auditions. And so we moved people through breakout rooms, and then some of us would move around and watch. But it was kind of like an improv jam, I guess. I mean, that's how I typically host auditions, because I feel like there's so much pressure with the word audition anyway. Like, let's make it as fun as it can be, because the more fun it is, the more we're going to get a realistic picture of that player. If we make it super stressful, like, then they're going to start like fighting for attention versus like being a good player. And maybe they are a good player, but they're like, look at me. So we did one round, and then we did some callbacks because there was a lot of people to really assess. And of course, there were some people like, absolutely must have. And then there were people like, we need to see more of. And so many of those people, showed up differently a second time, right? It was a comfort level and just some fantastic players.
And I imagine, like you said, time zones are a big issue. Do you have players that end up rehearsing or performing essentially in the middle of the night for them? You have 3 a.m. performers? We
don't. We have worked really, really hard. So when we built the teams, we really looked at, like, again, my partner Kale is like, he had this doodle poll, and then he had like a spreadsheet, and it would like move up the time zones. And so when we put the teams together, we played with some of that. And we have some outliers like the Philippines and Australia. So the Philippines are 12 or 13 hours ahead of us, depending on the time of year. And Australia is 14 or 16. So like, so when the team I coach, we have a gentleman from the Philippines, and for us, it's all Saturday, and for him, it's Sunday morning. It's like 9 a.m. Sunday morning. He wakes up and does improv. But he doesn't do it at 3 a.m. So that is good. So we're trying to be cognizant of that. And even when we do our shows, I do a lot of our shows at 10 a.m. in the morning, which here in the US, no one's watching improv at 10 a.m.
Sure,
But
sure.
it's not 10 a.m. everywhere. So, like for our folks in the Philippines, it's 10 p.m. For our folks in the
Right.
UK, it's the middle of the afternoon. For folks in India, it's night. It's 7 o'clock at night. So, it's like there's this wonderful improviser out of India, and I can't think of his name now. He does a show called "It's 3 a.m. Somewhere," and they play it at all different times of the day because
That's
it's
wonderful.
3 a.m. somewhere.
Yeah.
So we just try to really, even as we're building our workshops and our classes, we really try to keep them earlier. So our West Coast people probably suffer the most. It's like,
Oh,
get
is
up
that
at
funny?
7 a.m. and 8 a.m.
Oh,
But
gosh.
we've gotten them at least, that's still at least a reasonable hour.
Yeah. It's an hour that somebody's awake. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Oh,
but yeah,
that's
that's
great.
been a big struggle as time zones, and as time changes, it doesn't change everywhere.
Right.
So that's a whole nother.
Sure. And have you found, I don't know if you have these sort of logistics on your audience, but have you found that the shows are also getting an international audience because you have some of those performers in other places?
Yeah, I think so. And we kind of talked for a moment that they're not, oftentimes when things are live, we're not necessarily getting our biggest audience.
Mm-hmm.
That sometimes we're getting our biggest audience at later days. So I mean, we'll be live and 7 people are watching the show.
Sure.
And then you'll come back a couple days later and there's like 500 views. So people are watching for sure. And I think friends and family, of course, I think that's a huge piece. So if, we have like we did a show this morning and we had folks from the Philippines and the UK, as well as the US. And so it just depends on their prime time to watch it, right? So
Sure.
it makes a huge difference. But yeah, I think we do get international audiences through our suggestions. When we get suggestions through our Facebook feed, you can see some. Oftentimes there'll be comments when someone uses something that's so Americanized. Like they'll be like, what is that?
Sure.
And things of that nature. So we've had to adapt some of our language skills, I think, too. Especially as Americans, we're so used to just saying what we know instead of stopping and maybe like figuring out like, oh, does that make sense to someone else?
Oh, that's nice. It gets people to step back a little bit and be thoughtful and present about what they're saying and doing. That actually raises another interesting question for me. Have there been those kind of cultural reference barriers? How have people negotiated the fact that the references in the Philippines may be totally different from Argentina or wherever else?
Yeah, I think early on that was like a big, really interesting piece. I tell this story often. I'm probably told it too much. I was doing drop-in classes for kids as well because I teach kids. And one of my first classes, there was a young boy from Georgia here in the United States, and then a young boy from the UK. And in the scene, the young boy said, "Oh, my mom made these biscuits for breakfast." And the guy from Georgia that's what he was saying. And then after the scene was done, the kid from the UK was like, "Your mom gives you biscuits for breakfast? She's the nicest mom ever." Not knowing that biscuits mean cookie over in the UK versus a big old fluffy carb bucket here in the US. So that was one of the first stories. But I think another thing has been names. There's been, and then of course, like, cultural or pop culture references don't always cross over. So it was really interesting to see that everyone in the world knew who Donald Trump was. That was really an interesting thing.
Oh dear.
And they all wanted to talk about it whenever I was in a class because they wanted like our inside perspective. But like I could mention a show in the United States and maybe they might know what that show is where they are, but maybe they're not getting the access to it that we're getting to it. So spoiler alerts happened. There's that.
Oh no.
Yeah, and then names are a big one, right? So we all, there's stereotypical connotations to many of names, like here in the US, Karen, obviously is a big one. And so I took the time to sit down with one of my students from India, and I was like, I want you to teach me your stereotypical names. What are those names? I have a list, but I got to be honest, I've never been courageous enough to use them, but I have a list of them because I was like, I don't want to offend somebody. And they'd be like, how does Karla know? Does she know? So, but I think those kind of educate, like ask the questions, open the dialogue is what we've tried to do. And then I challenge people, like, if you don't know, let people know.
Sure.
Or fake it till you make it. That's always a good one in improv. So
yeah, I know there are a lot of there's a lot here in the States, especially now about playing characters of other races and other nationalities, and the pitfalls and dangers of that. Have you confronted any of those sorts of situations where people have been placed in the position of playing a culture that wasn't their own? How do you work through that?
That's a really good question. I haven't really had too much, and I think part of that is starting by setting up some boundaries and some expectations, like doing some check-ins. So I play. I've played several times with a woman from the Northeast, and when we ask her stereotypes, or I'm sorry, her boundaries, she's like, I don't want to be an angry Black woman in any scene ever. So like she is very clear from the get-go that this is what we are playing. And I think that that's really helped. But I also think also just establishing this culture of respect and trust, and not putting each other in those kind of situations.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing a lot more of that with gender as well. So like I don't have to come into a scene and be like, hi, Penelope, whatever, right? Like I can just come into a scene and start that scene and let my scene partner help to create their character through gender or race or whatever they choose to be. And so I think that's it. Letting the improvisers make the choices themselves versus us endowing those choices.
Sure.
And I think that's also reflective of age as well. I've had the opportunity this year to really be involved in the Vintage Improv Festival, which is out of Boston, run by Mickey Manting. Okay. And it's a humongous community of improvisers that are all ages 50 or older.
Sure.
And I fit into that community. And so, but I sort of never thought about some of the things that I'm learning from them. Like, I don't want to be someone's grandma in every scene. I don't want to be someone's mom in every scene. I want to play the 7-year-old boy. Like, and so again, I think if we, instead of gifting, as we call it as improvisers, all this stuff on our scene partner, maybe the bigger gift is letting them make some of those choices themselves.
Sure.
So I try to identify or instill in my students, like, figure out who you are to each other before you figure out who you are, because I think that can be more important. So how I feel about you in this scene is way more important than putting labels on who I am as a character, as a person. Those will come. And
Sure. That's interesting. I feel like there's some real unlearning for folks who have maybe been doing doing improv a little longer. Of like, no, don't. I mean, gifts are wonderful, but let folks establish for themselves who they want to be on stage. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy how the improv community has really changed, and they're just really taking so much better care of each other, which I respect so much, and I'm glad to be a part of that. But I know I look back at stuff and I'm like, oh, did you really do that 3 years ago? That's horrible. Yeah. So huge unlearning and great learning at the same time.
Wonderful. I just want to take a moment for those who maybe weren't with us right at the top of the session, just say, hey, welcome to the HUGE Artist Summit. I'm here with Carla Dingle talking about Improv Across Borders and her work and Queen City Comedy's work on the Global Improv Project. If you do have any questions that come up for you that you'd like to have answered, whether you're here in the Zoom room with us or over on YouTube, feel free to drop those in the comments. And then at the end, we'll have the opportunity to get some answers to those questions, hopefully. So welcome. Thank you for joining us, whether you're watching this live or after the fact. Oh gosh, I had another question on the tip of my brain. I'm interested in hearing about sort of how different improv cultures mesh. I'm sure there are different typical styles that the improvisers in different countries and different communities may have. Where have you seen those connections? Have there been any really interesting fireworks that have come out of that?
Oh, that's a good question. I think when I first started doing online improv, I got very connected quickly with the UK improv community. And people would be like, ooh, I get to improvise with an American. And I was like, I don't know what that means. And then as I dug into it a little bit more, I think there was this, I don't know, the assumption, whatever, this thought process that American improv is one way and the UK and maybe European improv is another way. And I can see some nuances that are very different. I think narrative is a little bit stronger, I think, in the UK than perhaps throughout the US, although there's some great narrative theaters like Hideout.
Sure.
But I think that was sort of the first thing. But instead of it being a barrier, I think it's been more of like a magnetic attraction.
Yeah.
More than anything, which has been really interesting. I get to play on a global team because I was like, I'm going to be on one of the teams. And they were like, did you audition? I was like, whatever. So I'm on a team, and there's a wonderful woman from the UK and then a gentleman from Baltimore, Maryland. And they've had so much fun playing together that they created a show for Highwire Improv called The British American Experience. And it's literally just a show talking about like the things that are different in their world through improv.
Oh, that's lovely.
And so I think that that's really sort of drawn people in. I think America is often sometimes seen as faster in improv than perhaps in the UK. And so sometimes I think that draws people in. Maybe it intimidates, but I think the more you play, it's not about the styles, it's about the people that you're playing with and making those connections.
That's great. Do you, just out of curiosity, do you have a sense of how many different countries altogether have been a part of the Global Improv Project?
I don't have, I mean, we'd love to have more numbers. I mean, through our students, we've had a wider variety of people than we have just through the teams. But right now, some of the countries that we have people are like Malta, Germany, Belgium, the UK, of course, the Philippines, India. We have a lot of folks from India, Canada, Mexico. I feel like I'm definitely Israel. Definitely missing some, for sure. I think Australia, South America, South Africa. So there's a lot, yeah. And I think it's just in Europe there seems to still be a great program happening with online improv and a lot of support and a lot of choices for people to jump into, whereas some of the other countries, this is their opportunity to take classes with people and instructors that are very different than they would have access to. And so that's really been, I think, a big drawing in of folks to come and kind of play with different people and take classes from incredible instructors.
Feel like you need to recruit somebody down at McMurdo Station on the South Pole and do a 7-continent improv show.
There you go. That would be awesome. That would be awesome.
Jill posted a really cogent question. When people can be together again, what will happen? Where do you see this going as COVID hopefully becomes less of a thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for us in America, like we feel like we're getting to the point where COVID is becoming less of a thing. Unfortunately, for much of the world, that's not where they are.
Oh, sure. Okay.
So our commitment at Queen City Comedy is the teams that we've created, as long as people want to continue to rehearse and be a part of that's something that we'll continue to do regardless of whether we're doing stuff in person and things of that nature. That being said, last night I had rehearsal with the team that I coach, and where we kind of had a moment where we were like, let's really talk about the future. What does this look like? What can you now commit to for the next 6 months with the potential that there might be in-person shows and you might be back in your workplace and things like that. And so we did alter our rehearsal schedule, which had been weekly, to we're moving to a bi-weekly rehearsal with a longer rehearsal time versus frequency. And so I think as we have to constantly adapt, we have to ask the people that are a part of this what's working and what's not working. Because what worked 6 months ago when everyone was locked up doesn't work now. So we want to continue doing stuff online. I know some great people out there like Jay Suko have said, like, I'm going to teach online forever. As long as I open a room and people show up, I will teach online. And I think it's sort of the same thing, but I think maybe the quantity of what we do might become smaller because we don't want to bring instructors in and then not feel like it's worth their time as well. So I'm sure this is not news to anyone watching who runs a theater. We are already starting to see less people showing up to classes and workshops than we were obviously seeing in the pandemic. So if we offer less, we think that maybe we'll be able to kind of still take care of everyone.
Sure.
So versus doing 8 workshops a month, we might do 3 workshops a month and things of that nature. But we definitely want to continue. And then I think the next step, which I'm sure people are figuring out who have technology, not me, is the hybridness.
I was going to ask, yeah.
So I have this incredible performer on our team who's in the Philippines, and the chances of him ever being able to come here, it's just not really financially feasible. But if we can have him on a big screen in the middle of a show, like how do we do that, and how do we make it work? And so, our teachers have had to adapt like that throughout the United States. And so hopefully we as improvisers can do that. And I'm sure, the next step, I think, for a lot of people is improvisers on stage together, streaming that without an audience. I think that's probably the next step. But we don't have plans of going anywhere. So
that's great. Yeah, I think that's, I know for me, because I started in improv in New York and then moved to Minnesota, and there was always that sadness of, I don't get to play with those people anymore. So the idea of Skype Prov or Zoom Prov was always there in the back of my head. And but the technology and the culture of this past year has really grown up around that, and it feels much more possible than it maybe did before. So that's great. I hope that does continue, because what a fun thing to get to go to a live show and see a performer, beamed in from Mumbai or Belgium or wherever. Oh, that's great.
That'd be amazing. Or Minnesota.
Or Minnesota, absolutely. I think it'll be really fascinating to see how the cross-pollination that has happened with the Global Improv Project and other classes that people are taking from all over the world, how much of that is going to feed back into those cultures in different countries, including ours. What are we picking up from some of these other folks?
Yeah, and there's some great. We're not alone in this global project.
Sure.
There's great other theaters that are out there doing a ton of stuff. So like Vinnie Francois with the Improv College is doing a lot of fantastic stuff internationally. The Nursery is doing a lot of stuff out of the UK internationally, the Hideout. So we're not like a singular entity.
Sure.
We have great partners out there that are taking care, and we're all sharing students and learning from each other. And I think one of the most interesting pieces has been, I met a young man from India, maybe August last year. I can't remember. And he was like, we have this group that we've put together, and they have like a WeChat, and they pick which workshops each of them will go to.
Oh, wow.
And then they have a jam every Friday, and they bring that information back. Wow. And I thought, well, that's what this is all about, right? Like, that's what this is about. And so I was like, well, how about if I just come do a workshop for you all, and then you don't have to bring it back. Everyone can experience it themselves. And so I kind of went to them, and that was such a great experience for me to really be in a room with, I think it was 14 improvisers who all knew each other really well from India. And I was so intimidated by them and how talented they were, and just their commitment. Like, I never thought about like, let me go take a workshop and bring it back to I never thought of that. Like, it wasn't something. Now I do think about those things.
Sure.
How I can bring them back, and so much learning just from just other people and other cultures in the world.
I feel, it's like improv accelerant, just grabbing it from everywhere and bringing it together. That's fantastic. Oh gosh, what was I going to ask next? Well, just in the sense of if there are people watching this who want to start to build those international relationships and collaborations, any advice to those folks? Are there any pitfalls? How would you go about forming some of those bonds and connections?
I think the easiest way to start is find the drop-in classes and find the improv jams. Because I think you learn a lot about a community through an improv jam, as well as a drop-in class. And then there's not a financial commitment immediately. So you have the ability to sort of dip your toes in and kind of see how it is. And not every community is for every person. That doesn't mean it's not a great community. They might just play differently. They might gravitate towards narrative improv or clown style improv. So you have to kind of figure out where you fit in. But then once you do, you have to think of it like, I don't know, like a LinkedIn kind of situation, right? You have to
Ah,
reach back out to people and connect with those people. And when you find people you love playing with, don't let them go. I think
mm,
like that's been for me one of the biggest things. I now play on an all female team that we were brought to. Part of us were brought together through like a show where they put us together, and then we were like, we don't want to stop playing together, and
mm,
so we added a few more women to the team that we really love playing with, and we do this all on our own. It's not through any
sure.
organization or anything like that.
That's great.
So we have the ability to do that now. Like
Yeah.
I guess I could have done something like that in Charlotte, but I probably wouldn't have. And so I think just find the people that like you're like, oh, those are my people, right? I
Sure.
was in a class with this woman last July, and she did like a 3-line scene, and I sent her a note, and I was like, oh, we're gonna have to be friends. Like that was all I saw of her was
Oh my
one
gosh.
three
Wonderful.
line scene. She's now my duo partner, and I didn't know her last year,
Yeah.
and so I think the risks you take on stage, you need to take
Mm.
off stage to find the people you want to play with who will
Oh, that's
challenge
lovely.
you and help you grow.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you very much for that. I'll put it one more call out for any questions that anybody may have. Let us know here on Zoom or in YouTube. In the meantime, what haven't I thought to ask? Anything else that you'd love to share about the Global Improv Project or what you do? Just to put you on the spot.
Well, I guess it's a little bit different from the Global Improv Project.
Mm,
I'll kind of touch on the Everybody Get In Here Festival,
great.
which is something that sort of came about through some of these kind of, just like I was talking about, connections. Back in September, we did an inclusion panel, and it was a large panel, kind of trying to be very representative of lots of different cultures. And through that, I was like, what's the next step? And again, partnering with some of the people that were on the panel, I found out that socially distant improv was already hosting an
Mhm.
anti-racism folks panel. At that time it was weekly, which is how I met John from Huge. And so I was like, well, why duplicate efforts, right? Because
Mm,
oftentimes the emotional labor that goes into that,
right.
uh, and someone kind of guided me in that direction. I needed a moment to learn that myself, and so I reached out
Mhm.
to them, to Socially Distant Improv, and was like, "Hey, we'd like to be a part of this. We'd like to support it. What can we
Mm,
do?" And we just simply started out with streaming that on our page every week, and then through that connection, we were like, we should do more. We should celebrate the great things that are happening out there, and collaborate and work together
mm,
versus being in competition with each other.
sure.
And so I mentioned this to my unofficial mentor, David Escobedo, who's with the Improv
Okay.
Boost. And if you don't
Okay.
follow the Improv Boost, you should. And I was like, I think Dana and I are going to do this festival. And he's like, we were going to do a festival. And I was like, well, we don't all need to do a festival. So let's do a festival together.
Yeah.
And so through that, we ended up with 8 organizations who did an all online festival in January, including Huge, who was celebrating their 10th anniversary
Mm,
at the time. And it was just like a week long celebration. And we even highlighted organizations that were doing stuff that weren't a part of that 8, like go to this jam and go to
mm,
this class. And it just felt like this is what community should be about. And
yeah.
this is what a global community should be about. And then when it was over, we started talking about like, well, we can't wait a year to do another one because we don't
Right.
know what life is going to be like in a year.
Mm,
And so we're doing another one in June, and we've added 8 more organizations. So we've added groups from India, groups from Canada, the Hideout out of Austin, Texas. And really, again, it's just a celebration, I think, of working together versus
yeah.
competition. And I know growing up in the improv world, feels like there's so much competition sometimes
Sure.
that I think this is culturally one of the things that I hope changes is just really supporting each other, and highlighting the good stuff that other folks are doing.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I think we all sort of went into this pandemic feeling sort of forced down the path of online improv. And this is, what we had to do because there was simply no other choice. And I think because of that, sometimes we overlook just what a powerful tool it can be to, yeah, to collaborate, to celebrate each other's work, and to cross promote that way. So that's
Yeah,
fantastic. Thank
and
you.
it's super scary doing online improv, especially in the beginning.
Yeah,
And I know so many of my fellow improvisers have made the choice that this isn't for them.
sure.
And I completely understand and respect that. But I think what online improv does is it teaches you to be a different kind of improviser.
Mm,
It's like you're acting for a camera versus acting for an audience. So what does that
sure.
look like? You have to listen better because Zoom will chop you out and stuff. You have to listen better because accents or words that are
Sure.
said differently. I say zebra. My friends in the UK say zebra, and I'm like, "What's a
Mm,
zebra?" And they're like, "You don't know what a zebra is, Karla?" So again, I think it's just making us be better all around, and hopefully those skills will transcend to the stage where we're better listeners, where we
mm.
continue to take care of each other, and we continue to celebrate each other. So I hope that's my hope. Sounds very
Wonderful.
like Hands Across America, but
Yeah, there's a reason that was so inspiring. Thank you. To be honest with you, I can't think of a better place to leave off than right there, with recognizing that we've been given a gift in a way, with online improv and with these collaborations, and not to let that go, to keep that going as we move hopefully back into a world, or forward into a world, where more in-person stuff is happening. So,
fingers
um,
crossed.
fingers crossed. All right. Any last thoughts you want to share before we call it an afternoon?
Well, thank you just for doing this. The conversations that you guys had earlier today are just so fascinating. And I think the
Yeah.
more that we can embrace the global community and share those people, I think it's just going to be better for everyone.
Mm,
So
so
I
fascinating.
appreciate you guys doing this and being committed to keeping it happening despite it having to be only virtual.
Well, thank you very much for that. On that note, yeah, anyone who missed it, earlier today, we premiered 5 interviews that Jill Bernard did, with improvisers in different countries all over the world, and the history of improv in their countries. And it's super fascinating. And we also have 2 more sessions coming up tomorrow, on online improv itself, and in terms of technique and promotion and all that, as well as improv for social betterment. So you can find that information on Facebook about those coming up tomorrow. If you can't join us live, these videos will all be on YouTube, so you can also check them out there. Thank you for everyone who joined us today. And thank you again, Karla, for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll sign off. Bye-bye.